I knew something was wrong before I even stepped out of the taxi. A strange SUV sat in my driveway. My welcome mat was gone, and my key would not fit the new lock. Then a woman wearing my favorite blue apron opened the door. "Can I help you?" she asked. Before I could answer, my son Daniel appeared behind her. He did not look surprised to see me. "Mom, you're back early," he said. Then he gestured toward the unfamiliar couple standing inside my living room. "This is Linda and Thomas Parker. They live here now." Thomas placed a folder on my coffee table. "Your son said you sold us the house." Daniel stared directly at me. "You signed everything before you left. Don't tell me you've forgotten already." Before I tell you what happened next, please like this video, subscribe and comment below. Would you trust your own child after a betrayal like this? My name is Eleanor Hamilton, and until the day I returned from Italy, I believed I understood the difference between being alone and being lonely. I was 67 years old, a retired high school librarian, and a widow of 6 years. I had spent more than 3 decades helping teenagers find books they did not know they needed. I had watched shy freshmen grow into confident seniors. I had written recommendation letters, helped students complete college applications, and quietly paid overdue lunch balances when I knew a family was struggling. For most of my life, I believed patience could solve almost anything. I was wrong. The house in Maplewood, New Jersey had been mine for 32 years. My husband Robert and I bought it when Daniel was 7. Back then, the kitchen had faded yellow cabinets, the roof leaked over the guest room, and the backyard was nothing but weeds and hard soil. Robert called it a house with good bones. He had been a construction engineer, practical and careful. The kind of man who measured twice before cutting anything. He repaired the roof himself, rebuilt the back porch, and spent 3 summers turning the yard into a garden. I planted roses along the fence. Daniel buried toy cars beneath the maple tree and forgot where he put them. Robert built bookshelves across one wall of the living room because he said a librarian should never have to choose which books deserved space. That house held every version of us. It held Daniel's birthday parties, Robert's Sunday pancakes, Christmas mornings, school projects, family arguments, apologies, funerals, and long, quiet evenings when we sat together without needing to speak. When Robert died suddenly from a heart attack, the house became both my comfort and my burden. For months, I could not enter the garage without expecting to hear him humming beside his workbench. I left his coffee mug in the kitchen cabinet exactly where he had placed it. I kept his gardening gloves in a basket near the back door even after the leather became stiff with age. Daniel visited often in the first year. He fixed a broken fence panel, changed light bulbs, and called every evening to make sure I had eaten. I was grateful. I told myself Robert would have been proud of the man our son had become. But gradually, Daniel's concern changed. At first, his comments sounded harmless. "You should hire someone for the yard, Mom." Then they became more direct. "You shouldn't be climbing stairs alone." Eventually, every visit included the same subject. "The house is too large for one person." Daniel began leaving brochures on my kitchen table. They showed smiling older couples walking through polished retirement communities, drinking coffee beside artificial fireplaces and attending painting classes. One brochure was for Willow Creek Senior Living. The cover showed a silver-haired woman laughing beside a swimming pool. Inside, Daniel had circled a 1-bedroom apartment and written "perfect for you." I laughed when I first saw it. "I'm not moving into a senior community," I told him. "I still drive volunteer travel and manage my own life." Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter and folded his arms. "That's what everyone says until something happens." "Nothing has happened. You fell last winter." "I slipped on ice while carrying groceries." "You forgot your dentist appointment." "I wrote the wrong date on my calendar." He sighed as though I were being deliberately difficult. "You don't have to prove anything to me, Mom." That sentence stayed with me because it sounded kind, but it did not feel kind. It felt like a warning. I should have noticed how often Daniel brought up money. He asked what I paid in property taxes. He wanted to know whether the mortgage had been fully satisfied. He questioned whether Robert had left any outstanding debts. I answered because he was my son. The mortgage had been paid off 11 years earlier. Robert had left a modest life insurance policy, and I received my pension from the school district. I was not wealthy, but I was comfortable. I did not need Daniel's help. That seemed to frustrate him more than it reassured him. Daniel owned Hamilton Renovations, a company that remodeled older homes in northern New Jersey. For several years, the business appeared successful. He drove a new truck, wore expensive watches, and posted photographs online of marble kitchens and luxury bathrooms. But in the months before my vacation, he seemed tense. He checked his phone constantly. He took calls outside. Once during dinner, I heard him arguing with someone about delayed payments and construction permits. When I asked if everything was all right, he smiled too quickly. Business problems. Nothing I can't handle. I believed him because I wanted to. The trip to Italy had been Margaret Wilson's idea. Margaret was my closest friend and had worked with me at the school library for 22 years. After Robert died, she became the person who refused to let grief shrink my world. "You have spent 6 years taking care of memories," she told me. "It's time to make a few new ones." We booked a 3-week tour through Tuscany, Florence, and Rome. It was the first major trip I had taken without Robert. Daniel offered to watch my house. "I'll water the roses, collect the mail, and make sure everything stays secure," he said. A week before I left, he came over with a black accordion folder. "We should organize your important papers before you travel," he said, "just in case there's an emergency." I almost refused. Then I remembered how Robert always kept our records carefully arranged. Daniel helped me sort insurance statements, tax documents, medical information, and copies of my identification. He asked where I kept the deed to the house. "In the metal file box upstairs," I said. He nodded, but did not write it down. At the time, I thought nothing of it. He also asked for a copy of my passport and full travel itinerary. "So I can contact the embassy if something happens," he explained. I handed them over. The night before my flight, Daniel called to confirm my departure time. Then he asked when I would return. "August 23rd, around 6 in the evening." "You're sure?" "Yes." There was a pause. "Just checking." While I was in Italy, Daniel sent messages every few days. He sent a photograph of my roses, another of my mail stacked neatly on the table. Everything appeared normal. On the final week of the trip, Margaret became ill after eating seafood in Rome. She decided to stay 2 additional days with the tour group while she recovered. I changed my flight and returned early. I did not tell Daniel. I wanted to surprise him and bring him the leather briefcase I had bought in Florence. Sitting in Margaret's quiet guest room after being removed from my own home, I replayed every conversation. The brochures, the questions about my mortgage, the request for my passport, the exact return date, the location of the deed. None of it looked like concern anymore. It looked like preparation, and for the first time I understood that Daniel had not taken advantage of an opportunity created by my vacation. He had been waiting for me to leave. The next morning I returned to my house with Margaret beside me. Daniel had texted 3 times during the night. The first message said, "Mom, please calm down." The second said, "We can discuss this privately." The third said, "Do not involve strangers in a family matter." I read that last sentence twice. He had sold my home to strangers, moved my belongings, changed my locks, and told me I had forgotten signing everything. Yet somehow I was the one involving outsiders. Margaret drove because my hands were still trembling. During the 20-minute trip from her house to Maplewood, she barely spoke. She knew me well enough not to fill silence with false comfort. When we turned onto my street, the unfamiliar SUV was still in the driveway. My stomach tightened. "This is your house," Margaret said quietly. "Do not let anyone make you feel like a visitor." I nodded, though that was exactly how I felt. Linda opened the door before we reached the porch. She wore a pale green sweater, this time not my apron. Her face looked tired, as though she had not slept either. "Mrs. Hamilton," she said, "please come in." Daniel appeared behind her immediately. His expression changed when he saw Margaret. "I thought we agreed to handle this as a family." "No," I said. "You told me what you wanted. I agreed to nothing." Margaret stepped beside me. "I'm here as Eleanor's friend." Daniel gave her a tight smile. "This is already difficult enough." "You made it difficult," she replied. For 1 second, the polite mask slipped from his face. Then Thomas entered the hallway carrying the same thick folder he had placed on my coffee table the day before. "We printed copies for you," he said. "Everything our closing agent gave us." I walked into the living room. The room looked almost familiar, which somehow made it worse. Linda and Thomas had kept my sofa but moved it toward the window. Robert's leather chair was gone. My family photographs had been removed from the wall, leaving pale rectangles where sunlight had not faded the paint. A framed landscape I had never seen hung above the fireplace. I sat in my own chair, though it no longer felt like mine. Thomas opened the folder and arranged the documents on the coffee table. There was a purchase agreement, a settlement statement, a notarized deed, copies of tax records, a bank confirmation showing a transfer of $680,000. My eyes fixed on that number. $680,000. That was below the house's market value, but not low enough to look obviously suspicious. Daniel had chosen the amount carefully. Then I saw my signature, Eleanor Hamilton. The shape of the capital E, the long curve in the H, even the slight upward slant at the end, it looked like mine. For a moment the room tilted. Margaret touched my shoulder. "Eleanor." "I didn't sign this," I whispered. Daniel sat across from me. "Mom, you did." I looked up sharply. "No, you were emotional before the trip. You had a lot on your mind. I know whether I sold my house." Daniel lowered his voice, speaking slowly, each word carefully separated. You may not remember every detail. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Linda glanced at him. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Daniel sighed and leaned back. "My mother has had a few episodes recently. What episodes I demanded." He looked at Thomas instead of me. "She left the stove on in March. I was heating soup. I turned it off when I finished. She misplaced her keys twice. I found them in my gardening bag. She missed a dental appointment. I wrote down Tuesday instead of Thursday." Daniel spread his hands as though presenting evidence to a jury. "These things add up." Margaret laughed once without humor. "I forgot my reading glasses yesterday. Should I surrender my home?" Daniel ignored her. He slid another page toward me. It contained a photocopy of my driver's license. Beneath it were the last 4 digits of my Social Security number, my date of birth, my property tax identification number, and the name of my bank. Private details. Details Daniel could only have obtained from the documents I had allowed him to organize before my trip. A cold realization settled over me. This was not a careless forgery. Someone had built a complete financial identity around my name. "Where did you get all of this?" I asked. Daniel's expression remained calm. "You gave it to me. For emergencies." "This was an emergency. Your business debts are not my emergency." Thomas looked at Daniel. "Business debts." Daniel's jaw tightened. "That has nothing to do with this." "I think it has everything to do with this," I said. Linda picked up the purchase agreement. "You told us your mother wanted a quick sale because she had already decided to move." "She did." "No, I did not." Daniel turned toward me with an expression of practiced sadness. "Mom, we discussed Willow Creek for months. You discussed it. I refused. You were afraid of change. I was not afraid. I was clear." His eyes hardened slightly. "You said the house was becoming too much. I said the gutters needed repair. You said you felt alone. Missing my husband is not the same as giving away my life." Silence filled the room. Thomas cleared his throat. "Mr. Hamilton, you told us your mother had already relocated to Florida." Linda looked at him. "He told me she was staying with friends until her apartment was ready." Daniel answered too quickly. "She changed plans several times." I turned to Thomas. "Did you ever speak to me before buying this house? No? Did you ever receive an email directly from me?" He hesitated. "We received documents from an email address with your name." What address? He read it from the paperwork. It looked convincing, but it was not mine. My real email contained my middle initial. This one did not. Margaret noticed immediately. "That is not Eleanor's email address." Daniel shook his head. "She created a simpler one for the sale. I did no such thing." Linda's face had gone pale. She sat beside Thomas and began scanning the documents again. I picked up the deed. There was a notary stamp in the lower corner and a signature from a woman named Patricia Lawson. The document stated that I had appeared before her and confirmed my identity. "I have never met this woman," I said. Daniel responded without hesitation. "It was handled remotely." "Then why does it say I appeared before her legal language?" Margaret leaned forward. "You seem unusually familiar with legal language for a contractor." He gave her a cold look. "I hired professionals." "Who?" I asked. Daniel stood. "This interrogation needs to stop." "No," I said, "it is just beginning." He stared at me. I held up the bank confirmation. "Where is the money?" Daniel's face changed again. "Not much, just enough." "It was deposited into an investment account for your future care." "What account?" "A managed account." "At which bank?" "The paperwork is still being processed. The sale is complete. The deed is recorded. Strangers are living in my home, but the account is still being processed." His voice sharpened. "I am trying to protect you. Then show me the money. You are upset. Show me the account. You are not thinking clearly." Linda looked at Daniel then, and I saw something shift in her expression. Not certainty. Doubt. Thomas gathered the papers more slowly than before. "Daniel," he said, "I think we need to see proof of where the funds went." Daniel turned on him. "You paid for the house. What happened after closing is a private family matter. It became our matter when she showed up saying she never sold it." For the first time, Daniel looked cornered, only for a moment. Then he smiled. It was the same calm smile he had worn when he introduced me to the people living in my house. "I understand this is frightening," he said, looking around the room, "but my mother has been struggling for some time. The kindest thing we can do is avoid feeding her confusion." My chest went tight. He was not merely denying my claim, he was building a version of reality in which every objection I made became proof that I was unstable. If I shouted, I was irrational. If I cried, I was overwhelmed. If I insisted on the truth, I was confused. Daniel had not only forged my signature, he had prepared to erase my credibility. And as I looked at the documents spread across my coffee table, I understood something far more terrifying than losing the house. He intended to make sure no one believed I was capable of owning it. I had spent my entire career teaching teenagers how to evaluate information. "Always ask who benefits," I used to tell them. "Facts matter, but so do motives." Standing in the middle of my own living room surrounded by strangers and forged documents, I finally asked myself the question I should have asked hours earlier. Who benefited from convincing everyone that I was losing my mind? The answer was standing 10 feet away. Daniel. I took a slow breath and folded the deed back into the folder. "I'm not leaving," I said. The room fell silent. Daniel looked almost disappointed, as though he had expected a different response. "Mom." I said I'm not leaving. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Please don't make this harder. I've lived here for 32 years. And now the house belongs to someone else." "No, someone made it appear that way." Daniel glanced toward Linda and Thomas before lowering his voice. "You're upsetting them." I laughed bitterly. "I'm upsetting them. They've done nothing wrong." "I never said they had." I looked at Linda. "I'm sorry you've been dragged into this." She nodded slowly. "So am I." Daniel stepped between us. "Mom, we need to discuss your next steps." "My next step is calling my attorney." "You don't have an attorney." "I'll find one." "You don't need one." "I believe I do." He folded his arms. "You've already moved out." I stared at him. "What?" "I had your belongings packed while you were away." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "My belongings. They're safe." "Where?" "In storage." My knees felt weak. "You packed my house." "I hired professionals." "You touched everything I supervised. You went through my bedroom." "I had to." "My closets." "Yes." "My office." "Yes." "The attic." "Everything." Each answer felt like another door closing. That house had contained not only furniture, but the private history of my marriage. Letters Robert had written while traveling for work. Birthday cards Daniel had made in elementary school. Boxes of Christmas ornaments collected over 3 decades. Photographs that existed nowhere else. They had all been handled by strangers while I was walking through museums in Florence believing my home was safe. "What gave you the right?" I whispered. Daniel's expression remained frustratingly calm. You weren't using those things anymore. I wasn't using my winter coats because it was July. You know what I mean. No, Daniel. I took a step closer. I honestly don't. Linda looked visibly uncomfortable. You packed everything before the sale, she asked. Daniel nodded. It made moving easier. She frowned. You told us your mother had already moved. I was simplifying. Thomas crossed his arms. That's not simplifying. Daniel ignored him. He reached into his briefcase and removed another folder. I anticipated this conversation. He slid several papers across the coffee table. At the top was the logo of Willow Creek Senior Living. My stomach tightened. Beneath it was a reservation confirmation. Room 214. 1-bedroom suite. Move-in date August 20th. 3 days before my scheduled return from Italy. What is this? I asked. It's where you'll be staying. I looked at him in disbelief. You rented me a room. I reserved one. Without asking me. You had already agreed. I never agreed. You don't remember. I remember perfectly. Daniel sighed dramatically. This is exactly what Dr. Collins warned me about. My eyes dropped to another document. It bore the letterhead of a medical practice. The signature at the bottom read Andrew Collins, MD. The letter stated that I was experiencing mild cognitive decline consistent with early-stage memory impairment. It recommended reducing financial responsibilities and increasing family supervision. I read every line, then I read it again. Finally, I looked at Daniel. I have never met this man. You had a telehealth consultation. No. You don't remember. No. You were tired before your trip. No. Every answer I gave seemed to strengthen his performance. He spoke gently, patiently, like a son caring for a confused elderly mother. I recognized the strategy immediately. He wasn't trying to convince me. He was trying to convince everyone else. I turned toward Linda. Have you ever watched someone lie so calmly that you begin questioning your own memory? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Daniel. You told us your mother asked for help. She did. You said she chose Willow Creek. She did. You said she'd already said goodbye to the house. She had. I shook my head. I've never even toured Willow Creek. Thomas frowned. You haven't? No. He looked back at Daniel. You specifically told us she'd fallen twice. Daniel hesitated. She has. I slipped on ice once, I said. Last winter. That isn't what you told us, Thomas replied quietly. You said the doctors were worried. Daniel's jaw tightened. They are. I've never been diagnosed with dementia. Silence. Linda slowly picked up the medical letter. When exactly did this appointment happen? Daniel answered immediately. The week before she left. I laughed without humor. The week before I left Margaret, and I spent 3 days shopping for luggage, planning our itinerary and eating lunch together. Margaret nodded. We were together almost every afternoon. I looked directly at Daniel. So tell me, what day did I supposedly meet Dr. Collins? He didn't answer. What time? Nothing. Where? Still nothing. Instead, he changed the subject. Mom, you're exhausted. No. You've had a long flight. Yesterday. You need rest. I need the truth. His expression hardened for the first time that morning. Only for a second, but I saw it. The patience disappeared. The kindness vanished. There was only irritation. You always have to make everything difficult. The words landed harder than he realized. Always. Not today. Always. As though refusing to surrender my own life were simply another example of my stubbornness. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police. Daniel didn't move. Go ahead. I intend to. They'll see valid ownership documents. I don't care. They'll see a medical recommendation. I don't care. They'll see a concerned son. I don't care. He stepped closer. And they'll see an elderly woman screaming that strangers stole her house. His voice became almost a whisper. Think about how that will look. For just a moment, I hesitated. Not because I doubted myself, because I suddenly understood the trap. Every emotion I showed could be used against me. If I cried, I was unstable. If I shouted, I was irrational. If I begged, I was confused. He had built a story before I even walked through the door, a story where I had already lost. Margaret reached over and gently lowered my shaking hand. Then she looked me straight in the eyes. "Eleanor." Her voice was calm. "So listen carefully." She squeezed my hand once. "You are not confused. You know exactly who you are. You know exactly where you live. And no one, not even your own son, gets to rewrite your reality." Something inside me steadied. I wiped my eyes, unlocked my phone, and dialed 911. Daniel watched without trying to stop me. Instead, he smiled. Not because he believed I was wrong, but because he believed every piece of the story had already been arranged long before I came home. And he was certain the police would believe the documents, instead of the woman whose name was written on them. The police arrived 12 minutes later. I remember checking the time because I needed something solid to hold on to. 12 minutes. That was how long it took for 2 uniformed officers to step into the house where I had lived for more than 3 decades and ask me politely to explain why I claimed it belonged to me. Officer Melissa Carter was the first to speak. She appeared to be in her early 40s, calm and professional, with a notebook already in her hand. Beside her stood Officer Brian O'Connor, taller, broad-shouldered, his expression unreadable as he looked around the living room. "Good afternoon," Officer Carter said. "We understand there's a dispute regarding ownership of the property." "Yes," I replied immediately. "This is my house." Daniel spoke almost at the same time. "My mother is confused." Officer Carter raised one hand. "I'll hear from each of you separately." For the first time since returning home, I felt a flicker of hope. At least someone was willing to listen. The officers separated us. Margaret remained beside me while Daniel walked into the dining room with Officer O'Connor. Linda and Thomas stayed quietly in the kitchen. Officer Carter opened her notebook. "Mrs. Hamilton." "Eleanor Hamilton. Can you tell me what happened?" I took a deep breath. "I left for Italy 3 weeks ago. My son agreed to watch my house while I was away. I returned yesterday to find strangers living here. My locks have been changed. My belongings have been removed. My son claims I sold the house." "And did you—" "No. Did you sign any documents authorizing a sale?" "Absolutely not." She nodded. "Did you give your son power of attorney?" "No." "Did you authorize anyone to sign on your behalf?" "No." Her questions were clear, simple, objective. I appreciated that. When I finished, she asked one final question. "Do you have proof this property belongs to you?" "I do." "Where is it?" "My original deed is in a locked metal file box." "Where is the box?" "I don't know anymore." Saying those words aloud made my heart sink. Daniel had already taken it. Officer Carter wrote several notes before thanking me. Then she crossed the room and joined the others. From where I sat, I could hear fragments of Daniel's conversation. He'd been declining for months. Doctor recommended supervision. She insisted on traveling anyway. We completed the sale before she moved. Every sentence was calm, measured, practiced. He wasn't searching for words. He was repeating a story he had rehearsed. A few minutes later, Officer Carter returned carrying the folder Thomas had shown me earlier. She sat across from me. "Mrs. Hamilton, we've reviewed the documents." I waited. "The deed appears to have been recorded." "I know." "The buyers have a signed purchase agreement." "I know." "The title transfer appears valid." "It isn't." She nodded sympathetically. "I'm not saying it's genuine." "Then help me." "What I'm saying is that we can't determine that here." I stared at her. "What do you mean?" She chose her words carefully. "If these documents are fraudulent, that will require a legal investigation. But this is my house." "I understand." "No." My voice cracked. "I don't think you do." I looked around the room. "My husband built those bookshelves." I pointed toward the hallway. "My son's height is marked on the wall inside that closet." Then toward the kitchen. "I chose every cabinet in this house." I looked back at her. "I belong here." Officer Carter's expression softened. "I believe this home has great personal meaning to you. It isn't about meaning. It's about ownership. I understand. Do you—" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she folded her notebook shut. "At this moment, we have a recorded property transfer and buyers who appear to have purchased the home in good faith. So they stay. We cannot remove them without a court order." I felt as though someone had knocked the air from my lungs. Daniel walked back into the living room just then. He looked appropriately concerned, almost heartbroken. Officer O'Connor addressed him. "Mr. Hamilton, if this matter is being disputed, we strongly recommend no further property changes until the court resolves ownership." Daniel nodded immediately. "Of course. I only want what's best for my mother." His performance was flawless. If I hadn't known him all his life, I might have believed him. Officer Carter turned back to me. "I recommend contacting an attorney experienced in real estate litigation and elder financial exploitation." The phrase caught my attention. Elder financial exploitation. Yes. If fraud occurred, that's the appropriate direction. It wasn't much, but it was the first person to acknowledge that fraud was possible. Daniel stepped closer. "I've already arranged a place for Mom." "No," I said firmly. "Willow Creek has a room ready." "I'm not going." He sighed dramatically. "Mom, I'm not going." Officer Carter looked at him. "She cannot be forced to relocate without proper legal authority." A tiny victory. Daniel's smile faded for only an instant. "I understand." Officer O'Connor handed me a small card. "This has information about legal aid resources." I took it with trembling fingers. When the officers finally left, the house felt quieter than before. Too quiet. Daniel turned toward me. "I tried to avoid this." "No." I picked up my purse. "You tried to make me disappear." Margaret touched my elbow. "Come with me." I didn't argue. I couldn't. As I walked toward the front door, I glanced into the hallway. Near the entrance stood 3 cardboard boxes. One was open. Inside lay framed family photographs. My wedding picture with Robert, Daniel's kindergarten graduation. Our first Christmas in the house. They had been stacked carelessly beside old lamps and folded blankets, as though 32 years of memories belonged in storage. I reached down and picked up the wedding photograph. Robert smiled at me from behind the glass. His arm rested around my shoulders. We looked impossibly young. "I'll come back for you," I whispered. Daniel watched silently. He said nothing. Perhaps he thought speaking would make him look guilty, or perhaps he simply didn't care anymore. Outside, the afternoon sun felt strangely cold. Margaret opened the passenger door. Before I climbed inside, I heard footsteps behind me. "Mrs. Hamilton." I turned. Linda stood on the porch. She glanced nervously toward the front door before walking closer. In her hand was a small white business card. "I don't have much time." She pressed it into my palm. "This is my personal number." I looked at her. "I'm sorry." "So am I." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I believed everything your son told us." "I know." She swallowed hard. "But after meeting you—" She hesitated. "I don't think he told us the truth." She looked back toward the house. "He said you had already started a new life." A sad smile crossed my face. "I was trying to." Linda lowered her voice even further. "When we moved in." "Yes." "There were still photographs in the closets." My heart skipped. "What else?" "A sewing basket beside the fireplace. My husband's gardening gloves. A coffee mug with someone's initials." I closed my eyes. "Robert's." She nodded. It didn't feel like someone had willingly left. Tears filled her eyes. "I should have questioned it." "No." I shook my head gently. "You trusted my son." She looked devastated. "I think we've both been deceived." She slipped something into my hand, another piece of folded paper. "I found this in one of the kitchen drawers." "What is it?" "I don't know." I didn't want Daniel to see me take it. Before I could unfold it, she stepped backward. "If anyone asks, I never spoke to you." Then she hurried back inside. Margaret waited until we were driving away before speaking. "What did she give you?" With shaking hands, I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a receipt. It was a sticky note. 3 words were written in hurried blue ink. "Check the storage." Nothing else. No signature. No explanation, just 3 words. I stared at the note for the entire drive to Margaret's house, because deep inside, I already knew. Whatever Daniel had stolen from me, he hadn't taken everything. And somewhere, inside that storage unit, the first crack in his perfect lie was waiting to be found. That little yellow sticky note sat on Margaret's kitchen table between us the entire evening. Check the storage. 3 words, no signature, no explanation. Yet I read them so many times that the edges of the paper began to curl beneath my fingertips. Margaret placed 2 mugs of chamomile tea on the table before sitting across from me. I don't think Linda wrote this. I looked up. You don't? She shook her head. The handwriting doesn't look like a woman's. I studied the letters again. The strokes were firm, hurried, almost mechanical. Whoever had written them hadn't been trying to hide their identity. They had been trying to deliver a warning before someone else found the note. Do you think Daniel dropped it? I asked. No. Then who? Margaret leaned back. I don't know. She took a slow sip of tea before adding quietly. But someone wanted you to look inside that storage unit before Daniel had the chance to remove something. That thought kept me awake most of the night. If Daniel had already packed my entire house, then whatever remained in storage was there only because he either hadn't found it yet or hadn't realized its importance. The following morning, Margaret insisted we not drive to the storage facility immediately. We're doing this the right way, she said. The right way takes time. I don't have time. You do if you want to win. She was right. Daniel had planned everything. If I rushed forward emotionally, I would simply be reacting to moves he'd already anticipated. We needed someone who understood the law, someone who could see what we were too frightened to notice. By 9 o'clock that morning, Margaret had made 3 phone calls. The 4th one changed everything. Her former student answered on the 2nd ring, Claire Bennett. I hadn't heard that name in nearly 15 years. When Claire arrived just after noon, I recognized her immediately, despite the years that had passed. She was 34 now, dressed in a navy business suit carrying a leather briefcase, almost as worn as the one Robert had used throughout his career. But her eyes were exactly the same. Curious, steady, kind. The moment she stepped through Margaret's front door, she smiled. Mrs. Hamilton. I stood to greet her. You don't have to call me Mrs. Hamilton anymore. She laughed softly. I don't think I'll ever stop. Then without warning, she hugged me. When Margaret called, she said quietly. I couldn't believe it. Neither could I. Claire had been one of the quietest students I'd ever known. She spent every lunch period in the library because she hated the noise of the cafeteria. Her father had died when she was 12. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Books had become her safest place. By her senior year, she wanted to attend law school but couldn't imagine paying for it. I remembered staying after work to help her complete scholarship applications. She earned every one of them. Now she owned a respected law practice specializing in elder financial abuse and estate litigation. Life had come full circle. Claire listened for nearly 2 hours without interrupting. I told her everything. Italy, the changed locks, the strangers, the forged signature. Willow Creek, the medical letter, the police, the sticky note. She took careful notes. Only after I finished did she ask to see every document Daniel had provided. Margaret had photographed every page before we left the house. Claire spread the printed copies across the dining table. For several minutes, she said nothing. She simply read, occasionally circling a paragraph, highlighting a date, making tiny notes in the margins. Finally, she looked up. What day did you leave for Italy? July 29th. And your passport, I handed it to her. She flipped directly to the entry stamp. Excellent. Excellent. She smiled for the first time. I think your son made his first mistake. Hope flickered inside me. What do you mean? Claire pointed to the notarized deed. This document states you personally acknowledged your signature before a notary on August 2nd. I frowned. I was already in Italy. Exactly. She reached for my passport again. You entered Italy on July 30th. She laid the passport beside the deed. You couldn't physically appear before a New Jersey notary 3 days later. I stared at the 2 documents. The contradiction seemed obvious now. Daniel said it happened remotely. Claire nodded. He probably realized the same problem after preparing the paperwork. She pointed toward another paragraph. See this? I leaned closer. Small print, easy to overlook. The document mentioned electronic notarization, so he fixed it. No, she smiled again. He made it worse. How? In New Jersey, remote notarization still requires strict identity verification. She tapped the page. That process leaves a digital record. I blinked. And I intend to find it. For the first time since returning home, I felt genuine hope. Claire opened her laptop. Let's see who notarized this. The name on the deed read, Patricia Lawson, Notary Public. Claire searched for her professional registration. Within seconds, she found a business phone number. Without hesitation, she called. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. Most of it consisted of Claire introducing herself and asking procedural questions. Then her expression changed. She grabbed a pen, asked Patricia to repeat something, wrote quickly, finally thanked her, and ended the call. Margaret leaned forward. Well, Claire looked at both of us. Mrs. Lawson says she has never spoken with Eleanor Hamilton. Silence. Never, I asked. Never. Then whose signature is that? Claire shook her head. She doesn't know. What about the remote session? There wasn't one. My heart began pounding. Claire continued. Mrs. Lawson also says something else happened 3 weeks ago. What? Her electronic notary account was accessed from an unfamiliar device. Margaret frowned. Hacked? Possibly. Did she report it? She changed her password immediately, but assumed it was a failed login attempt. Claire looked back at the deed. She had no idea her credentials had actually been used. I felt a chill spread through me. So someone stole her identity. To help steal yours. The room became very quiet. Claire began writing rapidly. I'll subpoena the platform logs. You can do that. Yes. If someone accessed her account, there will be timestamps. She paused. And IP addresses. I didn't understand much about computers, Claire noticed. Think of it like security camera footage. If someone unlocked a door electronically, the system remembers. That made sense. Margaret suddenly remembered something. The doctor. Claire looked up. What doctor? I handed her the medical letter. She read it once, then again. Then smiled even wider than before. What? This isn't signed. It has a signature. No, she pointed carefully. It has an image of a signature. I looked closer. She was right. The signature appeared printed rather than written. It could have been copied from anywhere. Claire placed the letter beside the deed. Daniel has a pattern. What pattern? He creates documents that look convincing until someone examines them professionally. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to imagine winning. Claire wasn't celebrating. She remained cautious. These inconsistencies don't automatically prove Daniel forged everything, but they prove something is wrong. They prove we have reason to investigate. She closed the folder. Eleanor. It was the first time she'd called me by my first name. I'm going to ask you a difficult question. All right. Did your husband ever keep copies of important documents somewhere unusual? I thought about Robert. He trusted filing cabinets, metal boxes, locked drawers. Then suddenly, I remembered. The workshop. Margaret looked confused. What workshop? The old workbench in the garage. Robert had built it himself, hidden beneath one drawer, behind a removable wooden panel. He kept duplicate copies of important records, insurance, property surveys, investment statements. Only 3 people had ever known. Robert, me, and Daniel. I slowly looked down at the sticky note again, checked the storage. If Daniel had emptied the house, then the workbench, the one piece too large to move immediately, might already be sitting inside the storage unit. And if Robert's hidden compartment was still intact, it could contain something Daniel had completely overlooked. Claire closed her notebook. We're going there. When? She stood. This afternoon. For the first time since my nightmare began, I wasn't driving toward the storage unit searching for memories. I was driving toward evidence. And somewhere inside that locked metal building, I had the unmistakable feeling Robert had left behind one final way to protect me, even years after his death. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the three of us were standing outside Maple Secure Storage on the edge of town. The building was exactly as I remembered from years ago when Robert rented a unit during our kitchen renovation. Long rows of beige metal doors stretched beneath the summer sun, each marked with a black number. The air smelled of hot asphalt and freshly cut grass. I looked at the office entrance. What if Daniel already emptied it? Claire adjusted the strap of her briefcase. Then we'll know. Margaret squeezed my arm. And if he didn't, Claire smiled faintly, then today becomes very interesting. Inside the office, a young employee greeted us with a practiced smile. Can I help you? Claire stepped forward. My client believes property belonging to her has been placed in a storage unit without her authorization. The employee's smile faded slightly. I'm not sure I can discuss customer information. Claire handed over her business card. I'm not asking you to violate privacy laws. I'm asking whether there is a unit rented under Eleanor Hamilton's name. The employee typed for several moments, then frowned. I don't see one. My heart sank. Claire remained calm. Try Daniel Hamilton. Another search. There is one. She glanced at the screen. Opened 3 weeks ago. Exactly when I was in Italy. Claire nodded. Can you tell us whether Mrs. Hamilton's belongings were moved there? I'm sorry, I can't discuss inventory. Of course. Claire reached into her briefcase and removed a prepared document. This is notice that ownership of the stored property is currently being disputed in pending litigation. Please do not release or destroy any contents until further legal instruction. The employee read the letter carefully. I'll notify the manager. Thank you. As we turned to leave, the manager himself stepped out from a back office. He appeared to be in his late 50s, wearing a company polo shirt with a name tag that read Frank. I overheard part of the conversation. Claire introduced herself again. Frank listened quietly. Then he looked at me. Mrs. Hamilton. Yes. I can't let you inside the unit. I understand. But he hesitated. I can answer one question. Claire nodded encouragingly. Did the movers bring furniture? Yes. Boxes. Many. Were they delivered all at once? Frank shook his head. No. Claire's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? There were 2 separate deliveries. The first was about 3 weeks ago. The second, he checked his computer. 5 days later. Claire and I exchanged a glance. Daniel had gone back. Why? What was delivered the second time? Claire asked. I honestly don't know. Smaller load? Yes. Only a few boxes. That didn't make sense. If Daniel had emptied my home before the buyers moved in, why return days later with more boxes? Unless he had found something afterward, or removed something before bringing the rest. Back in the parking lot, Claire opened her notebook. He made multiple trips. Margaret frowned. Why is that important? Because organized fraud depends on preparation. She looked at me. If Daniel missed something valuable during the first move, he may have gone back after realizing it. The workbench, I whispered. Claire nodded. Exactly. I looked toward the long rows of storage buildings. Somewhere inside one of those units sat 32 years of my life, and I couldn't even open the door. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm me. Then Claire's phone rang. She glanced at the screen. It's Patricia Lawson, the notary. Claire answered immediately. I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but I watched Claire's expression change. Curiosity, surprise, then intense concentration. She thanked Patricia before hanging up. What happened? Margaret asked. Claire smiled. Mrs. Lawson remembered something. What? 3 weeks ago, someone called pretending to be technical support for the electronic notarization platform. My pulse quickened. They asked her to verify her login credentials because of a supposed security update. Margaret sighed. A phishing scam. Exactly. Did she give them access? Temporarily. Claire looked directly at me. Someone tricked her into revealing enough information to access her electronic seal. I stared at her. So whoever forged my documents planned this long before you left for Italy. The realization was terrifying. This wasn't a desperate crime committed in panic. It was organized, patient, calculated. Claire's phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. She opened it, read silently, then looked at me with unmistakable excitement. What? I've got something. What? The title company. What about it? I requested a copy of the closing package. So, they've already sent part of it. She scrolled quickly. There are copies of your identification documents. I expected that. But look at the driver's license. She turned the screen toward me. At first glance, it appeared normal. My photograph, my name, my address. Then Claire zoomed in. The expiration date looked slightly blurred. So, this image has been edited. I don't understand. The text layer isn't aligned. She enlarged it further. The font is different. Margaret leaned closer. I still can't see it. Claire smiled. I can. She had spent years examining fraudulent contracts. Details invisible to me stood out immediately to her. This wasn't scanned from your actual license. It wasn't. No, it was digitally altered. I felt another small piece of Daniel's perfect story begin to crack. Claire saved the image. This is enough to request forensic analysis. We drove back toward Margaret's house, stopping only once for coffee. No one spoke much. Each new discovery answered one question while creating two more. When we reached the house, another surprise awaited us. A dark blue sedan sat in the driveway. A woman stepped out before we parked. Linda Parker. She looked nervous. Very nervous. She kept glancing over her shoulder as though afraid someone had followed her. I climbed out of the car. Linda, I'm sorry for coming unannounced. It's all right. She held a medium-sized cardboard box against her chest. I found this. What is it? It was hidden in the basement. My heart skipped. The basement. She nodded. There was a loose ceiling panel above the storage shelves. I noticed it while unpacking. She looked embarrassed. I wasn't searching. I believe you. I thought maybe it belonged to the previous owners. It probably does. She handed me the box. It felt surprisingly heavy. Dust covered the lid. The packing tape had yellowed with age. I recognized it immediately. Robert's handwriting. He always labeled storage boxes with thick black marker. This one simply read, Garage. Keep. My hands began shaking. I've never seen this before, Linda said quietly. I don't think Daniel knew it was there. Claire's eyes widened. Open it. I carefully peeled away the old tape. Inside were neatly organized folders. Property tax records, insurance policies, photographs of home renovations, original appliance warranties. Robert had kept everything. Then beneath the folders, a small fireproof document pouch. My breath caught. I unzipped it slowly. Inside lay the original survey of our property, copies of our mortgage satisfaction letter, and the original warranty deed, my deed, the one bearing the county seal from 32 years earlier. Tears blurred my vision. I thought he'd taken it. Claire gently removed the document. This is excellent. She inspected every page, then stopped. There were handwritten notes. Robert had written dates in the margins whenever important legal changes occurred. Claire smiled. He documented everything. I wiped away tears. That was Robert. Then Claire turned over the final page. A small folded envelope had been taped to the back. On the front, in Robert's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 simple words. If anything seems wrong, trust this instead. None of us spoke. Claire carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a USB flash drive. She looked at me. Did Robert ever mention this? I slowly shook my head. No. Claire held the tiny drive between her fingers. If your husband left digital records... She paused. This may be the most important piece of evidence we've found. For the first time since Daniel stole my home, I felt something stronger than hope. I felt Robert reaching across the years, helping me fight a battle he never imagined I would have to face. And none of us had any idea what was waiting inside that little flash drive. For nearly a full minute, none of us touched the flash drive. It rested in Claire's palm like something far heavier than a piece of plastic should have been. Robert had always believed in keeping records. He trusted paper more than promises and documentation more than memory. But he had also spent enough years working in construction to know that paper could burn, flood, or disappear. Perhaps that was why he had created a digital backup. Or perhaps he had simply been preparing for possibilities the rest of us never imagined. Claire finally looked up. We're not opening this on someone's personal laptop. Margaret frowned. Why not? If this eventually becomes evidence, I don't want anyone claiming we altered anything. I nodded. What do we do? My office. 30 minutes later, we were sitting inside Claire Bennett's law firm. The office overlooked downtown Newark. It was modern without feeling cold. Shelves lined one wall filled with legal books and neatly labeled case files. Claire led us into a conference room where a legal assistant was already waiting. "This is Emma," Claire said. "She's going to witness everything we do today." Emma smiled politely before placing a chain of custody form on the table. I watched as Claire carefully documented the flash drive. Time recovered, who discovered it, where it had been found, who handled it, everything. "You really have to write all of that down?" I asked. Claire nodded. "If Daniel's attorney argues that we planted evidence, I want today's record to answer every question before it's asked." Once the paperwork was complete, Claire inserted the drive into a computer that wasn't connected to the internet. Several folders appeared. My pulse quickened. The first folder contained photographs. Hundreds of them. Every major renovation Robert had ever completed around the house. The second held scanned financial records, mortgage statements, insurance policies, tax returns, everything organized by year. The third folder was labeled Property. Claire opened it. Inside were scanned copies of the original deed survey's permits and correspondence with contractors. Useful documents, but nothing that explained Daniel's actions. Then Emma noticed another folder. What's that one? Its name was simply Personal. Claire hesitated before opening it. Inside were dozens of family photographs. Daniel fishing with Robert, me planting roses, Christmas mornings, graduation ceremonies, videos from birthdays. For a moment I forgot why we were there. I watched my husband laugh on the screen carrying a much younger Daniel across the backyard. It hurt more than I expected. "He adored his father," I whispered. Margaret reached for my hand. "I know." Claire continued searching. Near the bottom of the folder sat a single video file. Unlike the others, it wasn't labeled by date. Its title read, "If Eleanor ever needs this, the room fell silent." Claire looked at me. "Are you ready?" I swallowed hard. "I think so." She clicked play. Robert appeared sitting at the workbench in the garage. His hair was grayer than I remembered, but his smile was exactly the same. "If you're watching this," he began, "then something unusual has probably happened." He chuckled softly. "I hope I'm simply being overly cautious." My throat tightened. Seeing him alive again, even on a screen, felt unreal. Robert continued. "Eleanor, you always teased me for making copies of everything." He held up a folder. "You said I trusted filing systems more than people." Another smile. "The truth is, sometimes people change." The room remained perfectly quiet. "I don't expect that from our family." He paused. "But construction teaches you something. You never assume a building will stand forever simply because you want it to. You prepare for storms." Claire glanced at me but said nothing. Robert leaned slightly toward the camera. "If anyone ever questions ownership of this house, and the original documents are only part of the story." He picked up another folder. "Every improvement I made, every permit, every payment, every inspection. I scanned all of it." Then he said something that made every one of us sit forward. "I also created a separate trust file." Claire immediately paused the video. "A trust?" I stared at the screen. "I don't know anything about a trust." She rewound a few seconds and played it again. "I also created a separate trust file," Robert continued. "The attorney insisted on keeping the original. I kept digital copies. If you need them someday, they're password protected." Claire paused again. "Search." Emma quickly searched every folder. Nothing, no trust documents, no password file. Only the video. Claire frowned. He intentionally mentioned them. "But they're gone," I said. "Maybe." She wasn't convinced. Emma searched again. Still nothing. Claire leaned back thoughtfully. "If someone accessed this drive, you think Daniel deleted them?" "I don't know." She opened the drive's properties. "Interesting." "What?" "The storage isn't full. So, there should be more files than we're seeing." Emma nodded. Looks like something was removed. Hope and fear arrived together. If Daniel deleted them, Claire interrupted. Deleting isn't always permanent. She called her firm's technology consultant. Less than an hour later, a man named Kevin arrived carrying specialized forensic software. He created an exact forensic image of the flash drive before examining the original. The process took nearly 40 minutes. No one spoke much while we waited. Finally, Kevin smiled. I found deleted data. My heart began pounding. Can you recover it? Most of it. Another 20 minutes passed. One by one, hidden files began reappearing. Scanned documents, old spreadsheets, family videos. Then, a folder. Its original name had been erased, but the recovered directory contained dozens of encrypted files. Kevin looked impressed. Whoever deleted this didn't overwrite it. Claire smiled. So we got lucky. Very. Kevin opened one document after entering a recovery process. Across the top appeared the title, Hamilton Family Trust. I looked at Claire. I've never seen this. I believe you. The trust had been established 2 years before Robert died. According to the document, ownership of several financial assets, including investment accounts and a life insurance reserve, would automatically transfer to me. But one paragraph immediately caught Claire's attention. She read it twice before looking up. This changes everything. What? The house. What about it? The trust specifically states that if ownership of the property is ever transferred through fraud, coercion, or incapacity, she paused. The trust immediately funds litigation to recover the property. I blinked. What does that mean? It means Robert anticipated the possibility of someone attempting to take advantage of you. Tears filled my eyes. He worried about me. He planned for you. Claire continued reading. The trust also named an independent trustee, not Daniel, not me, a professional fiduciary firm. Everything had been carefully structured years earlier. Margaret smiled through tears. Robert never stopped protecting you. Claire wasn't finished. There are financial statements attached. She opened another file. Investment account balances appeared, then another and another. Finally, she stopped. Eleanor. Her voice had changed. What? Daniel believed your house was your largest asset. It is. No. She slowly turned the monitor toward me. The trust currently holds just over $4 million. I stared at the number, certain I had misunderstood. 4, Claire nodded. Robert quietly built a substantial investment portfolio. I never knew. He apparently wanted you financially secure without worrying about money. I covered my mouth. For years I had believed we lived comfortably but modestly. Robert had quietly prepared for decades, not to make us wealthy, to make sure I would never become vulnerable. Claire closed the file. Daniel didn't just steal the wrong house. She looked directly at me. He targeted the one person his father spent years protecting. Then her office phone rang. She answered, listened. Her expression darkened. When she hung up, she took a slow breath. I've just received another report. What happened? The money from the sale. Did they find it? Yes. She met my eyes. It was never deposited into an investment account for your care. My stomach tightened. Then where did it go? Claire slid a printed banking report across the table. Within 48 hours of closing, nearly every dollar was transferred to cover overdue business loans belonging to Daniel Hamilton. The room fell silent. Daniel hadn't stolen my home because he wanted me safe. He had stolen it because he was drowning, and he had decided that saving himself was worth sacrificing his own mother. I stared at the banking report until the numbers began to blur. $680,000. Nearly every dollar had disappeared within 48 hours of the closing. Not into an investment account, not into a retirement fund for my future care, into Daniel's failing business. For several minutes, I couldn't speak. The silence in Claire's conference room felt heavier than any shouting ever could. Margaret finally broke it. So he never intended to protect Eleanor. Claire shook her head. The financial records don't support that claim. She slid another page across the table. I requested additional filings on Hamilton renovations this morning. I looked down. The company name appeared at the top, followed by a long list of liens, lawsuits, and overdue obligations, contractors demanding payment, suppliers seeking collections, equipment leases in default, bank notices, tax penalties, dates stretched back almost 18 months. 18 months, I whispered. Claire nodded. His financial problems didn't begin recently. He told me business was slowing down. This is much worse than slowing down. She pointed to one section. 3 major construction projects were abandoned. Another. 2 lenders filed collection actions. Then another. And this, she tapped the page, is a notice of intent to foreclose on his business property. I leaned back in my chair. Daniel had never asked me for money, not directly. Instead, he had asked about my mortgage, my savings, my insurance, my house. He wasn't making conversation, he was calculating. He planned this for months, I said quietly. I believe so, Claire replied. The evidence is beginning to point that way. Emma entered the conference room carrying another file. This just arrived. Claire thanked her and opened it. Inside was a copy of the title company's closing checklist. Every required document had been initialed. Every signature appeared complete. Everything looked perfect. Almost. Claire stopped at one page. There. What is it? I asked. The witness certification. She turned the paper toward me. It lists 2 witnesses. I read the names. One was illegible. The other made no sense. Jason Miller. Do you know him? Claire asked. I shook my head. No. Claire immediately searched the name through public business records. Within moments, several results appeared. One caught her attention. Jason Miller, she clicked. Licensed real estate consultant. Another click, then she frowned. He also worked as an independent closing coordinator. What does that mean? He handled paperwork between buyers, sellers, title companies, and lenders. So he was involved. Possibly. She continued searching. A professional profile appeared with a photograph. I stared at the screen. I've never seen him before. Claire wasn't looking at the photograph anymore. She was reading something else. Interesting. What? He resigned from his previous employer 6 months ago. Why? No reason listed. She made another note. I'm adding him to our witness list. Just then, her office phone rang again. She answered. Claire Bennett. She listened quietly, then glanced toward me. I understand. Another pause. Thank you for calling. When she hung up, she smiled slightly. That was Linda Parker. My attention sharpened immediately. Is everything all right? I think she's beginning to realize the full situation. Claire put the call on speaker summary from her notes. Linda says she and Thomas reviewed every document from their closing last night, and they found several inconsistencies. What kind? Claire checked her notebook. Daniel told them he had lived in the house for years while helping care for his elderly mother. I frowned. That's false. I know. He hasn't lived with me since college. Claire nodded. Linda also said Daniel insisted they never contact you directly. Margaret folded her arms. Of course he did, Claire continued. He claimed international travel would make communication stressful. I laughed bitterly. He was making sure I never learned about the sale before he finished moving everything. Exactly. Then Claire read the final note. Linda wants to meet. When? This evening. Why? She says there's something Thomas remembered after speaking with the police. 3 hours later, we met Linda and Thomas at a quiet coffee shop several towns away. Neither of them looked comfortable. Thomas removed his baseball cap as we sat down. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything, I replied. I should have asked more questions. You trusted the documents. I trusted your son. He looked down. And I shouldn't have. Linda reached into her purse and placed a folder on the table. We brought copies of everything. Claire immediately began reviewing the paperwork. Meanwhile, Thomas looked directly at me. Can I ask you something? Of course. Did Daniel ever mention a storage unit? My heart skipped. No. Thomas nodded slowly. I thought so. What do you mean? The day before closing, he paused, trying to remember. Daniel asked if we could delay moving in by 24 hours. Why? He said he still needed to clear out old construction materials. Claire looked up immediately. Construction materials. That's what he called them. Thomas frowned. But when I stopped by unexpectedly, he hesitated. I didn't see construction supplies. What did you see? Boxes. What kind of boxes? Family boxes. He looked at me apologetically. Photo albums. Kitchen dishes. Children's drawings. My husband's tools. He shook his head. It didn't look like someone preparing a property for sale. It looked like someone erasing a family's life. I swallowed hard. What happened? Daniel became angry. He said I wasn't supposed to come early. Claire made another note. Did anyone else help him? Thomas nodded. One man. Can you describe him? Tall. Dark hair. Maybe late 20s. He drove a white cargo van. Claire's eyes narrowed. Did Daniel introduce him? Yes. What name? Thomas thought for several seconds. Tyler, Claire wrote quickly. Last name? I don't remember. Then Linda spoke. I do. Every head turned toward her. She took a slow breath. Daniel called him Tyler Miller. Claire and I exchanged the same look. Miller. The same surname as Jason Miller. Are you sure? Claire asked. Linda nodded firmly. I remember because I asked if they were brothers. And Daniel laughed. She frowned as she recalled it. He said, unfortunately. Claire closed her notebook. I think we've just connected two people in the same operation. Thomas looked confused. You think they're related? I don't know, but I intend to find out. As we finished our coffee, Linda reached across the table and gently touched my hand. I need you to know something. I looked at her. We never wanted to take your home. I believe you. If we'd known... Her voice broke. We never would have signed anything. I squeezed her hand. I know. For the first time since this nightmare began, I truly believed it. Linda and Thomas weren't my enemies. They had been carefully selected because they were honest people. Daniel hadn't just lied to me. He had lied to them as well. As we walked back toward the parking lot, Claire's phone buzzed with a new notification. She stopped walking, read the message, then looked at me. I have confirmation. About what? She turned the screen toward me. A business registration document appeared. At the top were two names, Jason Miller, Tyler Miller Brothers, business partners, and both had worked on real estate closings connected to distressed property transactions. Claire locked her phone. I don't think Daniel acted alone. How many people? I don't know yet. She looked toward the fading evening sky. But this has become much bigger than a son stealing his mother's house. She paused. I think we've uncovered an organized fraud scheme, and for the first time I realized that recovering my home might only be the beginning. That night I barely slept, not because I was afraid anymore. Fear had carried me through the first few days after returning from Italy. It had kept my thoughts racing, imagining every terrible possibility. Now something else had replaced it. Clarity. For the first time, I could see Daniel's actions as pieces of a carefully constructed plan instead of isolated betrayals. He hadn't simply forged documents. He had created an entire false reality, a reality where I was forgetful, where I wanted to leave my home, where I had willingly sold everything, where anyone who questioned him would appear unreasonable. It was brilliant. It was cruel. And it depended on one thing above all else. No one could hear my side of the story before everything became official. The following morning, Claire called before 8. I'd like you to come to the office. Did something happen? Yes. Good or bad? A brief pause. I think we're finally ready to confront Daniel. By 9:30, Margaret and I were back in Claire's conference room. The recovered trust documents lay neatly organized beside copies of the forged deed, the altered driver's license, banking records, and photographs from the storage unit. Claire stood beside a whiteboard covered with names and arrows. Daniel Hamilton, Jason Miller, Tyler Miller, Patricia Lawson, Hamilton Renovations, the title company. Lines connected everything. It looked less like a family dispute and more like a criminal investigation. Claire handed me a folder. Read the first page. It summarized every inconsistency we had uncovered. I counted them silently. The notarization date conflicted with my passport. The electronic notary credentials had been compromised. The driver's license image had been digitally altered. The proceeds from the sale had gone directly to Daniel's creditors. The medical letter contained multiple irregularities. The buyers had received false information. The storage timeline didn't match Daniel's statements. Seeing everything together made one thing obvious. No single mistake proved fraud. Together, they painted a devastating picture. Claire looked at me. There's one question I still can't answer. What is it? Why Daniel keeps insisting you're confused. I frowned. Because it helps him. Yes. But I think there's another reason. Before I could ask what she meant, Emma knocked on the conference room door. Your investigator is here. A man in his early 40s entered carrying a slim laptop bag. Jason Brooks, he said, shaking my hand. I'm a licensed private investigator. Claire introduced us. I hired Jason yesterday to look into Daniel's financial history. Jason opened his notebook. I've confirmed the bankruptcy's overdue loans and lawsuits. We already knew some of that, Claire said. I found something else. He slid several printed photographs across the table. One showed Daniel entering a downtown office building. Another showed him leaving with Jason Miller. A third photograph stopped me cold. Daniel was embracing Tyler Miller outside a restaurant. They certainly didn't look like strangers conducting business. They've known each other for years, Jason said. Claire nodded slowly. Anything else? Jason opened another folder. I also interviewed 2 subcontractors who previously worked for Hamilton Renovations. What did they say? I asked. They both described Daniel as desperate during the last year. Desperate how? He borrowed money from employees. He delayed payroll. He promised investors payments he couldn't make. Jason paused. One subcontractor said Daniel repeatedly mentioned that everything would be solved after one big property deal. The room became quiet. Claire looked toward me. I think we know which property. My house. She nodded. Your house. Just after noon, Claire's receptionist buzzed the conference room. Daniel Hamilton is here. Margaret's eyes widened. He came here. Claire smiled slightly. I invited him. You what? I wanted to see how he'd respond. My stomach tightened. I don't know if I'm ready. Claire sat beside me. You don't have to say a word unless you choose to. What if he lies? He will? What if he manipulates everything again? Claire's expression remained calm. This time, we're prepared. She reached into a drawer and removed a small digital recorder. I checked New Jersey law, she smiled faintly. We're participating in the conversation. Recording it is legal. A few seconds later, Daniel entered. He looked exactly as he always had. Neatly dressed, clean-shaven, confident. If someone had met him for the first time, they would have seen a successful businessman worried about his aging mother. He smiled when he saw me. Mom. I didn't answer. He looked around the room. I didn't realize this would be such a formal meeting. Claire stood. I'm Claire Bennett. I represent Eleanor Hamilton. Daniel extended his hand. I'm glad she's getting legal advice. His composure irritated me more than anger ever could. Claire gestured toward a chair. Please. Daniel sat. I'd like to resolve this peacefully. So would we, Claire replied. Excellent. He folded his hands. My mother has been under tremendous stress. There it is again, I said quietly. Daniel looked at me. What? You keep speaking about me as though I'm not sitting here. His smile faltered briefly. I'm worried about you. No, I met his eyes. You're worried about yourself. He sighed. I knew you'd feel betrayed. Betrayed, I laughed softly. You sold my home. I protected your future. Claire slid a copy of the banking report across the table. Then perhaps you can explain this. Daniel glanced down. His face remained surprisingly calm. My business borrowed the funds temporarily. Temporarily? It was a bridge loan. From your mother. She agreed. I never agreed. He looked at me sympathetically. You don't remember. The words hit differently now. Not because they hurt, because they sounded rehearsed. Claire spoke before I could answer. Mr. Hamilton. Yes. Where is the written loan agreement? Daniel blinked once. There wasn't one. Why not? It was family. Claire nodded thoughtfully. So your mother sold her mortgage-free home. allowed you to use nearly $700,000 without signing a single loan agreement. Daniel hesitated. We trusted each other. I leaned forward. Then why did you forge my signature? I didn't. Claire placed my passport beside the deed. Explain August 2nd. Daniel looked down, then back up. It was handled electronically. Claire smiled. We've already spoken with Patricia Lawson. His expression changed, only slightly, but I noticed. So she says she never notarized Eleanor Hamilton. Silence. Daniel shifted in his chair. There must be some misunderstanding. Claire placed another document on the table. The login records are being subpoenaed. Another pause, then another document. The driver's license image has been digitally altered. Daniel crossed his arms. I don't know anything about that. Then another. The sale proceeds paid your creditors. His jaw tightened. My business was struggling. I know. You've seen the records. I have. He looked directly at me. I was trying to save everything. What everything? My company. By destroying my life, his voice finally rose. You still had money. I stared at him. There it is. The room became completely silent. Daniel realized what he'd said. Too late. You didn't need that house, he said more quietly. You were alone. You traveled. You could live anywhere. And what about you? I asked. He looked away. I built that company. No, you built it on lies. His breathing became heavier. You have no idea what it's like to watch everything collapse. I answered softly. I buried my husband. I know exactly what collapse feels like. For the first time since I returned from Italy, Daniel stopped pretending. The concerned son disappeared. The patient caregiver vanished. In his place sat a desperate man, cornered by his own decisions. He looked straight at me and spoke words I never imagined I would hear from my only child. I deserved that house more than you. No one in the room moved. Claire quietly reached toward the digital recorder. She didn't need to ask another question. Daniel had finally said enough. The room remained silent for several long seconds after Daniel's words. I deserve that house more than you. No one interrupted him. No one argued. Claire simply reached over, pressed a button on the digital recorder to mark the time, and calmly folded her hands. Sometimes the most damaging thing a person could hear was the sound of their own voice. Daniel seemed to realize what he had admitted. His shoulders stiffened. That's not what I meant. Claire spoke evenly. Then what did you mean? He hesitated. I meant, I had responsibilities. You had debts, Claire corrected. I had employees depending on me. You had creditors. I was trying to save my business. By selling property, you insist your mother voluntarily transferred. Daniel looked frustrated. Yes, Claire nodded. Then why say you deserved the house more than she did? He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked at me. You know I love Dad. I do. He wanted me to succeed. He wanted you to be honest. Daniel looked away. For a brief moment, I almost recognized the little boy who used to build tree forts with Robert in the backyard. Then the moment passed. Claire opened another folder. Let's talk about Tyler Miller. Daniel immediately frowned. I don't know what you're talking about. Claire slid one of the investigator's photographs across the table. It showed Daniel laughing beside Tyler outside the restaurant. You've known him for years. A business acquaintance. And Jason Miller? The same. What exactly did they do for you? They handled paperwork. What paperwork? Construction paperwork. Claire smiled faintly. Our investigator interviewed former employees. Daniel remained expressionless. They remember Tyler differently. No response. They described him as your technology consultant. Daniel shrugged. He helped with computers. What kind of computers? Our office systems. Claire leaned forward. Did he ever create videos for your company? Daniel blinked. What? Promotional videos. A few. What software did he use? I don't know. Claire calmly removed another sheet from the folder. This invoice suggests otherwise. She placed it in front of him. Tyler Miller Consulting, Digital Media Services, Video Production, AI Content Development. The final line caught my attention. Synthetic media enhancement. Daniel glanced at the invoice for barely a second. I don't remember. Claire looked at him steadily. I think you do. After Daniel left the office an hour later, no one spoke immediately. He had refused to answer most of Claire's questions once he realized how much we already knew. But he had made another mistake. He had confirmed his relationship with Tyler. Claire gathered the papers into neat stacks. He came here to measure what we had. And, I asked. He left more worried than he arrived. Margaret smiled. Good. Claire wasn't celebrating. We're still missing something important. The trust, I asked. No. The actual method. I frowned. What do you mean? We know forged documents exist. We know someone compromised the notary. We know your identification was altered. We know the money paid Daniel's debts. She tapped the table thoughtfully. But I still don't know exactly how they convinced the title company that you personally approved the sale. Before anyone could answer, Emma hurried into the room carrying a tablet. You need to see this. Claire looked up. What happened? I finally received the complete electronic closing file. Claire took the tablet. Within seconds, her expression changed. There it is. What? I asked. The identity verification. She turned the screen toward us. A video player appeared. Across the top were the words, Remote Seller Verification Session Recording Length, 3 minutes 47 seconds. My name appeared underneath. Eleanor Hamilton, recording date August 2nd. I stared at it in disbelief. That's impossible! Claire pressed play. A woman appeared on the screen. She sat in front of a neutral gray background. She wore a blue blouse, gray shoulder-length hair, reading glasses. For one horrifying second, I thought I was looking at myself. Margaret gasped. My God! The woman smiled at the camera. My name is Eleanor Hamilton. My blood ran cold. She sounded like me. Not perfectly, but close enough that someone unfamiliar with my voice would never question it. The woman held up what appeared to be my driver's license. She answered routine verification questions. She nodded politely. She smiled. Then she said the words that made my stomach twist. I understand that I am voluntarily selling my property. The video ended. No one spoke. Finally, I whispered, That isn't me. I know, Claire said, but it's convincing. Very convincing. The hairstyle matched mine. The lighting concealed fine details. The camera quality wasn't high enough to reveal imperfections. Emma looked horrified. How could someone make this? Claire answered quietly. Artificial intelligence. I stared at her. You mean they used existing photographs, video clips, probably recordings from social media. She looked back at the screen, then generated a synthetic version of you. I struggled to process what I was hearing. They made me say things I never said. Claire nodded. Yes. Margaret covered her mouth. I've heard about fake videos on the news. I have too, Claire replied, but this is one of the most sophisticated examples I've personally seen. She paused. Whoever created it knew exactly what they were doing. Claire immediately called Kevin the digital forensics specialist who had recovered Robert's deleted files. He arrived less than an hour later. Without speaking, he watched the verification video 3 times. Then he began enlarging individual frames. Most looked ordinary. Then he stopped. Interesting. What? Claire asked. Kevin pointed toward the woman's left ear. The earrings disappear for 2 frames. I squinted. He was right. For an instant, one earring seemed to melt into the side of her face before returning. Kevin advanced another few frames. The edge of the reading glasses briefly blurred into her hair. Then another. The fingers holding the driver's license appeared slightly distorted. Tiny errors, barely noticeable. But they were there. Kevin leaned back. Classic synthetic rendering artifacts. Claire looked relieved. So you can prove it. I can prove this video deserves forensic examination. Can you prove it was generated? I'll need the original file. The title company only sent a compressed copy. Kevin nodded. Then subpoena the original recording. He looked at me kindly. If this was AI generated, the original file may still contain hidden metadata. What kind of metadata? I asked. The software used. The rendering process. Creation timestamps? Possibly even the computer that exported it. Claire immediately began making notes. If Tyler Miller specializes in synthetic media, Kevin finished her sentence. Then someone made a serious mistake by using commercially generated video. That evening, after everyone else had gone home, Claire and I sat alone in her office. The city lights shimmered outside the windows. I felt emotionally exhausted. I keep asking myself the same question, I admitted. Claire looked up from her notes. What question? When did I lose my son? She was quiet for a long moment. I don't think you lost him all at once. What do you mean? I think he made one bad decision, then another, and another. Eventually, telling the truth became harder than continuing the lie. I looked down at Robert's recovered trust documents. He always believed Daniel had a good heart. Claire smiled sadly. People can have good hearts and still make terrible choices. Before I could answer, her computer chimed with a new email notification. She opened it, read silently, then slowly looked up. Eleanor, what is it? The court approved our emergency subpoena. For what? Claire turned the monitor toward me. The original AI verification file. She took a slow breath. And Tyler Miller has just become the most important witness in your entire case. For the first time since this nightmare began, it felt as though the truth was moving faster than Daniel's lies. The court approved Claire's emergency subpoenas within 48 hours. One went to the title company, another to the electronic notarization platform, a third to Tyler Miller's consulting business. Claire explained that speed mattered. If someone realizes we're closing in, she said, they may try to destroy evidence. I nodded. But they already deleted files from Robert's flash drive. They tried, she smiled faintly, and failed. That single sentence reminded me of something Robert often said whenever Daniel became frustrated building model airplanes as a child. Rushing creates mistakes. Daniel had rushed. He believed changing the locks, moving my belongings, forging documents, and convincing everyone I was confused would be enough. He never imagined someone would examine every detail, or that his own father had quietly prepared a safety net years before. 3 days later, Claire received the first subpoena response. Kevin, the digital forensics expert, joined us again in her conference room. A hard drive from the title company sat on the table sealed inside an evidence bag. Kevin carefully documented the serial numbers before connecting it to his forensic workstation. Everyone watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. After several minutes, the original seller verification video appeared. It looked identical to the compressed copy, until Kevin opened the metadata. There, Claire leaned closer. What do you see? The export history? He highlighted several entries. The file wasn't created directly by the verification platform. What does that mean? I asked. It was imported. Someone uploaded a completed video. He continued reading. The software identifier. He paused. Isn't the platform's recording application. Claire looked at him expectantly. What is it? Kevin slowly turned the monitor toward us. The export log listed the rendering software, a commercial artificial intelligence video generation program, exactly as he had suspected. He leaned back. This wasn't recorded during a live identity verification. It was manufactured first, then uploaded afterward. Claire exhaled slowly. That's exactly what we needed. Kevin wasn't finished. The metadata also includes the computer name. Everyone stared at the screen. One line stood out clearly. TM Workstation 03. Claire immediately reached for the investigator's report. TM. She looked at me. Tyler Miller. Kevin nodded. I'd be very surprised if that's a coincidence. That afternoon, Jason Brooks returned with another update. I found Tyler. Claire looked up. Where? He left town. My stomach tightened. What? He checked out of his apartment 2 days ago. When? The morning after Daniel met us here. Claire's expression hardened. So Daniel warned him. Jason nodded. I believe so. Did Tyler disappear completely? Not exactly. He handed over another report. He withdrew a large amount of cash, closed 2 business accounts, canceled his office lease, and purchased a one-way airline ticket. To where? I asked. Nevada, Claire frowned. Running. Looks that way. Jason hesitated before continuing. But what? I found someone else. He slid a photograph across the table. Jason Miller. Unlike Tyler, he hadn't disappeared. In fact, surveillance photographs showed him entering the same office every morning. "He thinks no one's looking," Jason said. Claire smiled. "Good." She picked up her phone. "I think it's time we requested a formal interview." 2 days later, Jason Miller arrived at Claire's office accompanied by his attorney. He looked confident, almost bored, a man accustomed to paperwork and negotiations, not someone expecting criminal allegations. Claire began politely. "Mr. Miller, thank you for coming. My attorney advised cooperation." "Excellent." She placed several documents on the table. "We'd like to discuss the Hamilton property transaction." Jason barely glanced at them. "I handled hundreds of closings." "I don't remember every file," Claire nodded. "That's understandable." She showed him the witness certification. "Your signature appears here." He looked briefly. "Looks like mine. You witnessed Eleanor Hamilton sign these documents?" "If I signed it, I probably did." Claire slid my passport across the table. "Mrs. Hamilton was in Italy." Jason remained silent. Claire placed the AI video metadata beside it. The verification video originated from software associated with Tyler Miller. Still nothing. Then she placed the banking records on the table. The sale proceeds immediately paid Daniel Hamilton's business debts. Jason shifted slightly. Claire continued, "And we have evidence your brother produced synthetic media used during the transaction." His attorney finally spoke. "My client isn't responsible for his brother's work." "Perhaps not." Claire calmly produced one final document. The investigators' photographs, Jason and Tyler together, Daniel standing between them, meeting repeatedly over several months. Jason's confidence faded. We were discussing unrelated projects. Claire didn't argue. Instead, she quietly pressed play on the recorder from Daniel's interview. Daniel's voice filled the room. "I deserved that house more than you." Jason looked toward his attorney, then back at Claire. For the first time, he looked nervous. The interview ended without a confession, but Jason's attorney requested a private meeting afterward. Claire didn't tell me exactly what was discussed. Only that evening did she call. "Eleanor." "Yes. I think Jason is beginning to understand his situation." "What does that mean?" "He's asking questions." "What kind?" "Questions about cooperation agreements." I sat quietly. "You think he'll talk?" "I think he's deciding whether loyalty to Daniel is worth prison." The decision came sooner than anyone expected. The following morning, Claire received another call. She immediately asked me to come to her office. When I arrived, Jason Miller was already there, this time without his attorney. He looked exhausted. His shirt was wrinkled. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. He wouldn't meet my gaze. Claire spoke softly. "Jason has something he'd like to say." Several seconds passed. Finally, he looked at me. "I'm sorry." I said nothing. He swallowed hard. "I never thought it would go this far." "What did you think would happen?" I asked quietly. He rubbed both hands together. "Daniel said..." His voice cracked. "He said you wanted the money. He said you were moving voluntarily. He said you were starting over." I stared at him. "And when you realized that wasn't true, I wanted out. So why didn't you stop?" His shoulders slumped. "Because by then, I'd already helped." Claire quietly activated the recorder. Jason took a deep breath. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he finally admitted the truth. "It wasn't your signature. I arranged the closing. My brother generated the verification video. And Daniel..." He closed his eyes. "Daniel planned the whole thing from the beginning." The room fell completely silent. Months of deception, weeks of investigation, thousands of pages of documents, and at last, someone from inside the scheme had finally confirmed exactly what I had known from the moment I stood on my own porch. I had never sold my home. My son had stolen it. 3 months after I returned from Italy, I walked into the Essex County Courthouse, carrying nothing but a leather folder and every ounce of strength I had left. The building was quieter than I expected. Movies had taught me to imagine crowded hallways, dramatic shouting, and lawyers rushing from courtroom to courtroom. Instead, people spoke in low voices. Clerks carried stacks of files. Families sat on wooden benches waiting for their names to be called. Justice, I realized, was not loud. It was patient. Claire met Margaret and me outside courtroom 4B. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I looked at the heavy wooden doors, like I'm about to testify against my own child. She nodded sympathetically. "That's because you are." No words could make that easier. Daniel arrived a few minutes later with 2 attorneys. He wore a charcoal suit I had bought him years ago when he landed his first major construction contract. I remembered how proud Robert had been. "Every man should own one good suit," he'd said. Seeing Daniel wear it now felt almost unbearable. For just a moment, our eyes met. He looked tired, older. The confidence he had displayed in Claire's office was gone, but he still refused to look ashamed. The bailiff opened the courtroom doors. "All rise." The judge entered, greeted everyone, and reviewed the case. Claire had warned me that civil proceedings could feel slow. She was right. The morning was spent introducing documents, confirming procedures, and establishing timelines. Only after lunch did the testimony begin. Claire called me first. I walked to the witness stand with my heart pounding. After taking the oath, I sat down and looked toward the courtroom. Daniel stared at the table in front of him. He never looked at me. Claire approached gently. "Mrs. Hamilton, how long did you own the property in question?" 32 years. "Did you ever decide to sell your home?" "No." "Did you authorize anyone to sell it?" "No." "Did you sign the deed presented during closing?" "No." She walked me carefully through every step, planning my vacation, allowing Daniel to watch the house, returning early, finding strangers inside, being told I had forgotten selling my own home. I answered each question calmly, not because the memories no longer hurt, because Claire had taught me something important. Truth doesn't need performance. When she finished, Daniel's attorney stood. He smiled politely. "Mrs. Hamilton, no one disputes that you've experienced tremendous emotional stress." "I have. Grief after losing your husband." "Yes." "Living alone." "Yes." "Normal memory changes associated with aging." I looked directly at him. "I occasionally misplace my reading glasses." A few quiet laughs echoed through the courtroom. He smiled. "So you admit memory isn't perfect?" "Neither is yours." His smile faded. I continued. "But forgetting where I left my glasses is very different from forgetting I sold my home." The judge looked over his glasses. "Please answer only the questions." "Yes, Your Honor." The attorney changed direction. "You trusted your son." "I did." "So you gave him access to important documents?" "To organize them." "Voluntarily?" "Yes." "So he had no reason to steal information?" "He had no permission to misuse it." The attorney nodded. "No further questions." Claire's next witness was Kevin, the digital forensics specialist. Using enlarged displays, he explained the metadata recovered from the AI-generated verification video. Frame by frame, he demonstrated the rendering artifacts, the disappearing earring, the distorted fingers, the inconsistent reflections. Then he presented the metadata. The file originated from artificial intelligence rendering software. He pointed toward the screen. "It was exported from a workstation identified as TM Workstation 03. Daniel's attorney stood. "Could someone fabricate this metadata?" Kevin answered immediately. "Not without leaving evidence." "Did you find such evidence?" "No." "So your professional opinion, the video does not depict a genuine live verification session. It is a synthetic production." The courtroom became noticeably quieter. Patricia Lawson testified next. She explained how she had been deceived by a phishing call. Someone posing as technical support convinced her to reveal temporary authentication credentials. "I never met Eleanor Hamilton. I never notarized her signature. I never conducted a remote verification." Her testimony eliminated the foundation of the forged deed. Then came Jason Miller. When he entered the courtroom, I noticed Daniel finally looked nervous. Jason took the oath. Claire approached. "Mr. Miller, why are you testifying today?" "Because I participated in the transaction." "Did Eleanor Hamilton authorize the sale?" "No." "Who organized it?" Jason looked toward Daniel. For several long seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Jason answered, "Daniel Hamilton." The courtroom remained silent. Claire continued, "What was your role?" I coordinated the closing. And your brother? He created the identity verification video, using artificial intelligence. Yes. Did Daniel know that? Jason closed his eyes briefly. He requested it. Daniel's attorney jumped to his feet. Objection. The judge looked at Claire. Foundation. Claire calmly handed over Jason's cooperation agreement and earlier recorded statement. Mr. Miller is testifying from direct personal knowledge. The judge nodded. Overruled. Jason continued. Daniel said his mother would never agree to sell. So he said we'd have to make it look like she already had. I felt the air leave my lungs. Hearing those words spoken aloud in open court somehow hurt more than discovering the betrayal itself. Late that afternoon, the final major witness appeared. Tyler Miller. He had been located in Nevada 2 weeks earlier and agreed to return under subpoena after negotiating his own legal arrangement. He looked far younger than I expected, almost boyish. Nothing about him suggested someone capable of manufacturing another person's identity. Claire approached carefully. Did you create the verification video? Yes. Who hired you? Daniel Hamilton. What instructions did he give? Tyler swallowed hard. He provided photographs, old family videos, recordings from social media. He said, Tyler's voice weakened, he needed a realistic verification because his mother couldn't travel. Claire asked one final question. When did you realize that explanation wasn't true? Tyler looked toward me. The day she came home. What happened? I saw the police body camera footage online after officers responded. He lowered his head. She looked completely shocked. I knew then. She had never agreed. As court recessed for the evening, Daniel suddenly stood. I'd like to speak. His attorneys immediately tried stopping him, but he walked forward anyway. The judge looked surprised. Mr. Hamilton? Daniel faced the bench. Then, unexpectedly, he turned toward me. His eyes were red, not from tears, from exhaustion. I never meant... He stopped. Started again. I never wanted to hurt you. The courtroom remained completely still. I thought I could fix everything. I thought if I saved my company first, I could repay you. He laughed bitterly. I kept telling myself it was temporary. He finally looked directly at me. But every lie required another one, and another, and another. His shoulders sagged, until there was no way back. No one spoke, not even the judge, because everyone in that courtroom understood something. Daniel wasn't confessing because he had suddenly become honest. He was confessing because the evidence had finally become impossible to escape. The truth had caught him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, my son could no longer hide behind forged documents, or behind me. The judge did not issue a ruling that afternoon. Despite Daniel's unexpected admission, procedure still mattered. Court recessed until the following Monday to allow both sides to submit their final written arguments. Claire assured me that this was normal, but the waiting felt almost unbearable. After everything that had happened, I wanted one simple sentence. The house belongs to Eleanor Hamilton. Instead, I spent another weekend at Margaret's home. She tried to distract me with gardening old movies and long walks through the neighborhood, but my mind always drifted back to Maplewood. I wondered whether my roses still needed watering, whether Linda had dusted Robert's bookshelves, whether my favorite coffee mug was still sitting inside one of those storage boxes. Most of all, I wondered whether I would ever unlock my own front door again. Monday morning arrived gray and humid. Claire met me outside the courthouse carrying only one folder. That's all I asked. She smiled. We've already given the judge everything. Daniel arrived a few minutes later. He looked different. His expensive suit had been replaced by a plain navy jacket. His shoulders were slightly hunched. The confidence that had once filled every room he entered had disappeared. When he walked past me, he stopped. Mom. I looked at him quietly. I know you probably don't want to hear this. No, I don't. He lowered his eyes. I am sorry. I searched his face. 6 months earlier, I would have accepted those words without hesitation. Now I understood that apologies and accountability were not the same thing. I'm glad you finally understand what you did, I said. But understanding doesn't erase it. He nodded once. I know. Then he walked into the courtroom. The judge entered promptly at 9 o'clock. After reviewing the final submissions, he adjusted his glasses and began reading his decision. His voice remained calm and measured. The evidence presented demonstrates a coordinated pattern of fraudulent conduct. My hands tightened around the edge of the table. The court finds that the plaintiff, Eleanor Hamilton, never knowingly or voluntarily agreed to transfer ownership of the property. A tear rolled down my cheek before I even realized I was crying. The judge continued. The notarization process was compromised. The identity verification video was artificially generated. The deed relied upon by the defendants is therefore void. He looked directly toward the attorneys. Ownership of the Maplewood property is immediately restored to Eleanor Hamilton. For a moment I couldn't hear anything else. Restored. One word. 32 years of memories returned with it. The judge continued outlining financial consequences. Every filing associated with the fraudulent transfer would be canceled. County property records would be corrected immediately. The title company would receive instructions to reverse the transfer. Daniel and the other defendants would remain subject to separate criminal proceedings based upon the evidence already presented. Then the judge addressed Linda and Thomas. The court further finds that the purchasers acted in good faith. He explained that they had also been deceived. They would receive compensation through title insurance and subsequent legal recovery from the responsible parties. Linda quietly wiped away tears. Thomas simply nodded. I felt almost as relieved for them as I did for myself. They had never wanted my house. They had wanted a home. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited near the courthouse steps. Claire had warned me they might appear. A case involving forged deeds, artificial intelligence, elder financial exploitation, and real estate fraud had attracted significant attention. Several microphones turned toward us. Mrs. Hamilton, how do you feel? What would you say to other seniors? I looked at Claire. She gave me a small encouraging nod. I stepped toward the microphones. I'd say this. My age did not make me incapable. It simply made me a target. I paused. If something doesn't feel right, ask questions. If someone pressures you to sign documents, ask more questions. And if the person trying to silence you happens to be family, don't assume they're right simply because you love them. The reporters wrote quickly. One asked another question. Have you forgiven your son? I took a long breath. I haven't answered that question for myself yet. And I don't think forgiveness can exist without accountability. Then Claire gently guided me toward the waiting car. 2 days later, we returned to my house. This time, no police officers were present. No arguments, no locked doors. Linda and Thomas were waiting on the front porch. The moment I stepped out of the car, Linda walked over carrying a small brass key. She placed it carefully in my hand. It belongs to you. I closed my fingers around it. The familiar weight nearly brought me to tears again. I'm sorry, she whispered. You have nothing to apologize for. Thomas extended his hand. We've already started moving out. You don't have to rush, I said. The judge already explained everything. He shook his head. This was never our home. Inside the house looked remarkably familiar. Linda had taken extraordinary care of it. The hardwood floors shone. The curtains had been washed. Even Robert's bookshelves were spotless. I hoped we'd be here only a few weeks, Linda admitted, so I tried to treat everything with respect. You did. I meant it. We walked slowly from room to room, the kitchen, the living room, the hallway. When I reached the garage, I stopped. Robert's workbench stood exactly where it always had. I ran my hand across the worn wooden surface. So many years, I whispered. Claire quietly remained near the doorway, allowing me a private moment. Finally, she cleared her throat. Eleanor. Yes. I have one more piece of news. I turned toward her. The trustee contacted me this morning. The trustee, regarding Robert's trust. I had almost forgotten about it amid everything else. Claire handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a formal letter. The trustee confirmed that Robert's investment portfolio had continued growing over the years. Current value, $4,382,000. I stared at the figure in disbelief. Claire smiled. Robert updated the trust several months before he died. He left detailed instructions. What kind? He wrote that the money wasn't intended to make your life luxurious. It was intended to guarantee your independence. My throat tightened. Robert knew me well. He understood that independence mattered more to me than wealth ever could. He also included one final instruction. Claire unfolded another page. If Eleanor ever chooses to sell the Maplewood house, the decision must be entirely hers. No one else's. Not an attorney, not a trustee, not even family. I smiled through tears. Even after his death, Robert had found one last way to protect my right to choose. Standing in the garage where he had built so much with his own hands, I realized something unexpected. The house no longer represented the past alone. It represented freedom, and for the first time in months, its future would belong to me. The first night I slept in my own house again, I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt quiet. The silence was different from the loneliness that had followed Robert's death. This silence carried relief, gratitude, and a sadness I knew would never disappear completely. I walked through every room before going to bed. The kitchen where Robert had insisted on making pancakes every Sunday. The dining room where Daniel used to spread out his science projects. The living room where we celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and Christmas mornings. Every corner held a memory. Some were beautiful. Some now carried pain, but none of them belonged to the people who had tried to erase my life. They belonged to me. Over the next several weeks, my belongings slowly returned from the storage unit. Professional movers carefully carried furniture back inside while I unpacked dozens of boxes. One afternoon, I found Robert's old coffee mug wrapped in newspaper. The faded blue letters still read, "World's Best Husband." I smiled. "I think they got that right." Margaret laughed from across the kitchen. "I've missed hearing you joke." So have I. Healing, I discovered, didn't happen all at once. It happened one ordinary moment at a time. Daniel's criminal case moved forward separately. Because he had confessed in court and because Jason and Tyler Miller had cooperated with prosecutors, the evidence was overwhelming. He eventually accepted a plea agreement rather than forcing a lengthy criminal trial. The judge sentenced him to several years in state prison for fraud, identity theft conspiracy, and financial exploitation of an elderly adult. The sentence made headlines throughout New Jersey. Many reporters focused on the artificial intelligence video. Others focused on the forged deed. To me, neither represented the greatest tragedy. The greatest tragedy was that my son had reached a point where stealing from his own mother seemed easier than asking for help. Claire later told me that several of Daniel's former creditors recovered part of what they were owed through the liquidation of his remaining business assets. Hamilton Renovations officially closed. Years of work ended not because of one bad contract, but because of a long series of dishonest choices. Tyler Miller accepted responsibility for creating the synthetic verification video. His cooperation significantly reduced his sentence, but he permanently lost his professional licenses and became one of the first people in our state to face criminal consequences for using artificial intelligence to facilitate real estate fraud. Jason Miller also accepted responsibility for coordinating the fraudulent closing. Their testimony helped investigators uncover several additional suspicious property transactions involving other victims. Knowing that my case prevented future crimes brought me a measure of peace. If my experience protected even one other family, then something meaningful had come from all this pain. Linda and Thomas Parker stayed in touch throughout the legal process. One Saturday afternoon, several months after the court ruling, we met for lunch. "I've been wanting to ask you something," Linda said. I smiled. "Go ahead. Have you decided what you'll do with the house?" I looked around the restaurant before answering. "I have." Claire had reminded me countless times that Robert's trust guaranteed the decision was mine alone. For weeks, I had walked through every room asking myself one difficult question. Was I keeping the house because it still gave me joy, or because I was afraid to let go? Eventually, I found the answer. I loved the memories. But memories did not live inside walls. They lived inside people. I looked at Linda and Thomas. Would you still like to buy it? Their eyes widened. After everything, Thomas asked. Yes. But this time, I smiled. We'll do it honestly. Linda covered her mouth. We don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything. You already proved something important. What? When you realized the truth, you chose integrity over convenience. I paused. That's exactly the kind of people I'd like living here. Several months later, the sale closed. There were no forged signatures, no fake videos, no hidden agendas. I sat beside Claire and signed every page myself. Linda and Thomas insisted on paying full market value. When everything was complete, Thomas handed me a framed photograph. It showed the maple tree Robert had planted decades earlier. We wanted you to have this, he said, so you'll always remember where it stood. I smiled. I could never forget. With the proceeds from the sale and Robert's trust, I purchased a smaller cottage, overlooking a quiet lake less than an hour away. The house had one floor, a sunny reading room, and a garden large enough for roses. It felt peaceful. Not because it replaced my old home, because it represented a future I had chosen myself. Margaret lived only 15 minutes away. Claire visited often. Sometimes she joked that she still owed her career to the librarian who refused to let a shy teenager give up on law school. One spring afternoon, Claire asked whether I would consider speaking at a conference about elder financial abuse. I've never given speeches, I laughed. You've already told the hardest story you'll ever tell. She was right. I accepted. Over the following year, I spoke to senior centers, libraries, churches, and community organizations across New Jersey. I explained how easily trust could be manipulated, how convincing forged documents could appear, how dangerous artificial intelligence became when placed in dishonest hands. Most importantly, I reminded people that asking questions was never something to be ashamed of. After one presentation, an elderly gentleman approached me with tears in his eyes. My son keeps asking me to sign property papers, he whispered. I wasn't sure whether I was simply being paranoid. I placed my hand gently over his. Talk to your own attorney first, he nodded. I will. At that moment, I realized Robert's greatest gift had not been the trust fund. It had been teaching me to value preparation over assumption. His wisdom had saved me long after he was gone. People sometimes ask whether I ever forgave Daniel. The honest answer is complicated. I visited him once after his sentencing. He looked smaller than I remembered, older. He apologized again. This time I believed he meant it. I told him something I had spent months learning myself. I will always be your mother, but I can never again be the person who trusts you without question. He cried, so did I. Forgiveness, I learned, does not always restore a relationship. Sometimes it simply allows your own heart to stop carrying hatred. Whether Daniel earns back any part of my trust will depend on the choices he makes long after prison. That is no longer something I can control. Today, when I sit beside my lake with a book in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, I often think about the life Robert and I built together. Not the house, the life. Because buildings can be stolen, money can disappear, documents can be forged, but the values we teach, the kindness we offer, and the courage we discover in ourselves can never truly be taken away. And that, more than anything else, is what finally brought me home. If my story has taught me anything, it is that trust should never replace wisdom. Loving someone does not mean surrendering your right to ask questions. Whether the person standing in front of you is a stranger, a business partner, or even your own child, you deserve honesty, respect, and the opportunity to make your own decisions. Growing older does not make us less valuable. It does not erase our judgment, our dignity, or our right to control our own lives. Unfortunately, those who seek to exploit others often depend on silence guilt and the assumption that no one will challenge them. That is why speaking up matters, seeking legal advice matters, keeping records matters, and believing your own instincts matters. I also learned that forgiveness and accountability are not opposites. We can choose compassion without pretending that serious harm never happened. Real healing begins when the truth is acknowledged, responsibility is accepted, and healthy boundaries are respected. Most of all, I learned that family is defined not only by blood but by character. Throughout my darkest days, friends, honest professionals, and even strangers stood beside me when I needed them most. Their integrity reminded me that goodness still exists even after betrayal. Thank you for spending this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you, or someone you know, ever had to stand up for yourself against someone you never expected to betray your trust? Your story may give someone else the courage to protect their own.